Let us examine the stylistic component of A.K. Ramanujan's poem, The Striders. Ramanujan was a poet obsessed with the technical aspects of his poetry. He was workaholic, and so he produced tremendous quantities of verse. He was also perfectionist, so he published relatively very little. He spent long days, long weeks, long months, even long years polishing up his poems, some of which, like The Striders, were rather short. He used to call his poems his babies. He used to say that his poems were his babies and that they dirtied themselves and that it was his job to clean them up. This obsession with the technical aspects of poetry resulted in Ramanujan's poems possessing an extremely fine finish, an extremely polished exterior, as exemplified by the Striders. Ramanujan was a modernist poet, very much influenced by T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pound, and all his poems were free verse poems. The Striders, a typical Ramanujan poem, is in verse libre. A free verse poem characteristically avoids the metered line, the rhyme scheme, and the stanzaic pattern. This is true of the poem under consideration. The Striders is divided into two stanzas. The first stanza, consisting of 8 lines, and the second stanza comprising 7 lines. The lines are of uneven length. The juxtaposition of long lines and short lines in the poem is masterly. The diction of the Striders is carefully chosen. It is a very scientific diction, a very academic diction. Take, for example, the construction, capillary legs. The construction capillary legs is certainly not drawn from the personal experience of the poet. It is drawn from his scientific knowledge. The Striders appears to have been a poem written by a professional entomologist, though Ramanujan was no entomologist. He was passionately interested in the flora and the fauna around him. The Striders allows itself to be interpreted along eco-critical lines. The poem could not have been written by a poet who is not possessing passionate ecological sympathies, a poet who is unable to identify himself with his ecological environment, a poet who loves nature, not just nature but the lowliest aspects of nature, as exemplified by the puny insect, the strider. The poet makes excellent use of figures of speech such as alliteration in bubble-eyed water bugs, capillary legs, and landslide of lights. He makes powerful use of allusion at the opening of the second stanza when he says, "Now not only prophets walk on water." The imagery is detailed, vivid, and indelible. A very powerful symbolism, a very powerful and multifaceted symbolism is written into the fabric of the poem. The strider stands for the Indian American. The strider stands for the family man. The strider stands for the poet, especially the Indian poet in English. The strider stands for the poem. It is true that the Striders, being a typical modernist poem, shuns the use of the regular rhyme scheme. But the Striders does use a rather irregular rhyme scheme for generating a special effect. The first line of the poem, which ends with the word search, rhymes with the fourth line of the poem, which ends with the word perch. The second line of the poem, which ends with the word thin, rhymes with the seventh line of the poem, which is also the penultimate line of the first stanza of the poem, which ends with the word skin. It is 3 o'clock in the morning and I am feeling groggy. I hope that you will forgive me if I decide to wrap up the discussion by pointing out that the Striders draws its strength partly from the fact that A.K. Ramanujan has provided the poem with an abrupt beginning and an unexpected closure.